Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Drew's witness stand disaster, Joe's ringtone plan gives Trina and Kai truth. Drew Kane will have a substantiation stand disaster while Giovanni Gio Palmieri carries out a sneaky plan. Trina Robinson and Kai Taylor will also have a chance to get the verity, so then's what GH suckers can anticipate. First on Thursday's occasion, Brooklyn Quartermain will get into an argument with Dante Falconeri, who might admit Harrison Chase was right to dig deeper into Michael Corinthos' justification. Dante will also contend he didn't want to do that, so he may be talking about Chase's suspense. Brooklyn will push Dante to fix it, but Dante may argue that Chase's conduct still crossed the line and earned some scrutiny. At the courthouse, Trina will tell Kai that they've a chance to get the verity right now. Maybe Kai and Trina will give Gio the green light to move forward with a sneaky plan. Gio agreed to help Kai and Trina get to the verity, indeed if he doesn't know all the details. All Gio has to do is make sure Wiley Corinthos calls Michael's phone, which will give Trina and Kai an occasion to learn what ringtone he uses. It may not be long until Trina and Kai hear a song that's relatively different from Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It could leave Kai and Trina realizing they were wrong about Michael being the shooter inside the house that night. Of course, at some point during a court break, Trina and Kai might also hear Scout Quartermain call Willow Kane. It could throw Kai and Trina for a circle if Willow uses the Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star ringtone for Scout just like Drew does. Since Trina and Kai are about to make a big discovery about who pulled the detector, they may settle on Willow as the malefactor ultimately. As for Gio, he'll be in a rush when he bumps into Christina Corinthos Davis on her way into Sonny Corinthos' place. Christina will wonder what the hurry is, but Gio may make up some reason rather of revealing anything about his plan with Kai and Trina. Christina will eventually have a discussion with Sonny and Fred over Michael's implicit legal straits. Sonny will suppose it'll all work out for Michael in the end and will push Christina to believe that. It turns out Sonny will also have a catch-up session with Brooklyn and give her the support she needs, too. Once Drew takes the stage in court, he'll advertise that he's there to set the record straight. Unfortunately, Drew will end up having a meltdown and will declare that Michael's going to rot in captivity. Alexis will have to do damage control after Drew's disastrous evidence, so she'll advise Willow that she's their stylish shot at turning effects around. Despite Alexis' former reservations, she'll let Willow swear in the end and try to use her to undo the Drew mess. Willow's trial, so stay tuned for updates on all the wild news to come. The atmosphere inside the courthouse was formerly electric as Kai and Trina took their seats, bracing themselves for the final answer they'd been staying for, but no bone could have prognosticated just how far Drew would helical once the verity began closing in on him. From the moment the gavel struck, Drew's body language screamed insecurity, his jaw gripped, his eyes zipping hectically across the room, and his fists tensing with every word spoken by the execution. Trina, calm but alert, sat beside Kai, whose expression reflected a blend of determination and unbelief. They weren't just there to observe, they were there for check. And what they got was far more shocking than they ever imagined. As the prosecutor laid out the timeline, detailing Drew's questionable conduct, suspicious meetings, and the disturbing inconsistencies in his evidence, the courtroom grew eerily silent. Each disclosure felt like another crack in Drew's precisely constructed facade. His defense attorney tried desperately to maintain control, brooding for him to stay calm, but Drew's countenance was formally unraveling. The judge's stern aspect only sounded to fuel his agitation. Trina leaned toward Kai and rumored, "This is it. The verity is coming out." Kai jounced, his eyes locked on Drew, who now looked like a man possessed by his own falsehoods. Also came the stunner substantiation, a piece of evidence that directly contradicted Drew's before statements. The prosecutor calmly asked, "Mr. Kane, can you explain why your justification doesn't match the security footage from that night?" For a split second, Drew sat. The room held its breath. And also, without warning, he snapped. "That footage is fake," he cried, slamming his hands on the defense table. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The judge banged the gavel, ordering him to control himself, but Drew was formally twisting. His voice cracked as he indicted everyone, Alexis, the police, indeed the judge, of conspiring against him. Trina's eyes widened. She had always suspected Drew was hiding commodity, but this public breakdown verified her worst fears. Kai rumored, he's losing it. Drew's attorney tried to intermediate, but Drew shoved his president back and stood up, pointing angrily toward the execution. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I offered, he yelled. His words were lower of a defense and further of a concession, revealing a man overwhelmed by guilt, fear, and despair. The judge hovered to hold Drew in disdain, but Drew slightly sounded to hear. His eyes were wild now, his voice shaking as he blustered about treason and injustice. I did what I had to do, he screamed. That single judgment transferred shockwaves through the courtroom. Trina seized Kai's arm. Did you hear that? She rumored. He just admitted it. Kai jounced, his face pale. This was the answer they had been searching for. As court officers moved closer, ready to restrain Drew if necessary, the prosecutor seized the moment. Mr. Kane, are you saying you committed these conduct deliberately? Drew dithered, his bravado faltering. For the first time, fear flitted across his face. The room was so quiet you could hear a leg drop. Also Drew murmured, they left me no choice. It wasn't a full concession, but it was enough. Trina felt a rush of feelings, relief, wrathfulness, and heartache all at formerly. She had believed in Drew formerly. Numerous in Port Charles had. But now, watching him unravel in front of everyone, she realized how deeply he'd fallen. Kai exhaled sluggishly, his hands pulsing. We've our answer, he said still. The judge ordered a recess, but the damage was formally done. News spread like campfire across Port Charles. Phones buzzed, journalists rushed by, and whispers filled the hallways. Drew Kane, formerly seen as an idol, had just destroyed his own credibility in a matter of twinkles. Outside the courtroom, Trina and Kai were incontinently girdled by curious bystanders and journalists. Do you suppose Drew is shamefaced? One asked. Trina took a deep breath before answering. What we saw moment speaks for itself. Her voice was calm, but her eyes revealed the emotional weight of the moment. Kai added, we came for the verity, and we got it. Meanwhile, Drew was attended down, still murmuring to himself, his face a admixture of rage and remorse. Gone was the competent man who formerly walked into court believing he could manipulate the system. In his place stood someone broken, exposed, and facing the consequences of his conduct. Back in Port Charles, responses were nippy and violent. Carly was furious, pacing her living room as she replayed the news in her head. He ruined everything, she murmured. Alexis, watching the content with a counsel's eye, shook her head. That outburst sealed his fate. Indeed, those who had formerly defended Drew began to question their fidelity. For Trina, the moment marked a turning point. She had spent weeks making together suggestions, questioning motives, and trusting her instincts. Watching Drew buckle in court validated everything she had suspected. But it also hurt. I know I wanted it to end like this, she admitted to Kai latterly that evening. I just wanted the verity. Kai squeezed her hand. And now you have it. As night fell over Port Charles, the fallout from Drew's courtroom meltdown continued to spread. Social media exploded with responses, captions screamed about his insane jest. And Enterprise ran rampant about what would be next. Would Drew face serious consequences? Would more secrets be revealed? One thing was certain, nothing in Port Charles would ever be the same again. Drew's emotional collapse wasn't just a courtroom moment, it was a symbol of everything unraveling in his life. His connections, his character, and his future all atrophied in front of a stupefied followership. And for Kai and Trina, the day marked the end of their hunt and the morning of a new chapter, one where the verity, no matter how painful, eventually came to light. From the judge's gavel to Drew's explosive outburst, every second of that trial will go down as one of the most shocking courtroom scenes in General Hospital history. The pressure, the drama, the raw emotion, it was each there. And as Port Charles rolls from the fate, suckers are left asking the same burning question: what will be to Drew Kane now that his mask has eventually fallen? The moment Drew Kane erupted in the courtroom, Port Charles inclusively held its breath. But the meltdown didn't end with his shouting or slamming of tables. No, Drew's unraveling was further than a public spectacle. It was an unraveling of a life erected on secrets, falsehoods, and half-trueness, and everyone in that room felt the intensity as it radiated outward. Security officers floated just out of reach, tense but reluctant, as the man who had formerly sounded imperturbable teetered on the edge of complete chaos. Drew's face flushed sanguine, modes visible in his neck, eyes zipping between the judge, the prosecutor, Kai, Trina, and the stupefied observers, as though trying to find someone, anyone, to condemn. His voice, originally loud and angry, cracked and wavered as guilt, fear, and despair collided within him, exposing a vulnerability no bone had anticipated. And in that vulnerability, Kai and Trina set up the evidence of everything they had stressed, and hoped, to learn. Trina's grip on her tablet tensed, her knuckles white as she leaned slightly forward, intent on catching every single word, every earthquake of Drew's voice. She had always been the logical one, regular in her approach, but indeed she couldn't prepare for the sheer intensity of seeing a man unmask himself in real time. The courtroom wasn't just a room presently, it had come a gauntlet, burning down pretense and leaving only raw emotion. She caught Kai's eye, noting the blend of triumph, shock, and anguish reflected there. They had both pursued the verity relentlessly, tracing suggestions, questioning substantiations, digging into Drew's history, and now the lucre, however gratifying, was bittersweet. Kai's jaw was tight, and his typically stoic address had cracked slightly, revealing the emotional weight he carried. He'd suspected Drew's insecurity for months, but seeing it manifest so intimately was another position entirely. The prosecutor, seeing an opening, pressed further, precisely navigating Drew's emotional eruption without inflaming it further. "Mr. Kane," she said, her voice calm but establishment, "your former statements indicated that you were away at the time in question. Can you attune your earlier evidence with what we now have as substantiation?" Drew's response was immediate, furious. I told you it's all a setup," he screamed, nearly tripping his president in the process. A collaborative rustle gurgled through the courtroom. The judge slammed the gavel, demanding order, but Drew was beyond reason. His allegations began to fly hectically: Alexis, Trina, Kai, the police, indeed unnamed conspirators in Port Charles, everyone came a target for his frantic narrative. Trina's mind contended as she heeded to his diatribe. Every word, though chaotic, held vestments of verity, moments that corroborated the reservations they had spent weeks attesting. And also came the subtle slips, the moments when Drew's own words betrayed him, expressions he couldn't control that admitted further than he intended. I had no choice, they forced me," he murmured at one point, nearly under his breath. That bitsy admission transferred a shiver down Trina's chine. Kai, beside her, exhaled sprucely, a hand pressing against his forepart as if trying to physically contain the flood tide of feelings. The courtroom drama reached a top when Drew began pacing, slamming his fists against his defense table, each movement erratic, changeable. The attorneys tried to recapture control, but the spectacle had reached a point where reason itself sounded helpless. "You don't understand what I had to endure," he cried, pointing at unseen adversaries, yet his eyes kept fluttering back toward Trina and Kai, as if trying to quietly communicate his frustration or maybe maintain for understanding. The duality of his state, wrathfulness and fear intertwined, made him appear contemporaneously dangerous and pitiable. Outside the courtroom, the fallout began nearly incontinently. News vans swamped the front of the structure, cameras rolling, journalists crying questions. Social media lit up with clips of Drew's meltdown, the footage going viral within twinkles. Suckers of General Hospital erupted in discussion online, anatomizing every word, every gesture, every nuance of Drew's jest. Enterprise ran rampant about his internal state, motives, and implicit consequences. Some observers felt sympathy, seeing a man cornered and worsening, others were affrighted, labeling him deranged and dangerous. The division imaged the chaos inside the courtroom, where feelings were running so high that indeed seasoned officers and legal professionals plotted to maintain calm. Meanwhile, Trina and Kai set up themselves navigating a delicate balance of satisfaction and anguish. They had eventually entered the answers they sought, but the answers had come at a cost, the emotional unraveling of a man formerly considered an idol by numerous. Trina's studies contended back to all the subtle signs they had observed over the months, the late-night meetings, the inconsistent stories, the cryptic dispatches, and Drew's inexplainable responses to certain questions. It all made sense now, but the clarity was shadowed by the woeful spectacle of mortal collapse. Kai, though generally composed, couldn't completely mask his response. The times of experience, the innumerous cases, the myriad pitfalls he'd faced, it was all familiar terrain, yet nothing in his career had prepared him for witnessing a man strike himself so completely in public. His instincts screamed caution, but at the same time, a part of him couldn't look down. He'd worked alongside Drew in the history, seen flashes of courage and resourcefulness, and now the discrepancy, the stark difference between the man Drew had been and the man he'd come, was nearly unsupportable. Inside the courtroom, the judge eventually interposed decisively. The gavel struck sprucely, demanding silence, the echo resonating through the tense room. Drew, breathing heavily, his face red and barred with sweat, eventually broke, though only shortly. The judge's voice was stern, unyielding. "Mr. Kane, this court won't tolerate outbursts. You'll answer the questions calmly, or you'll be removed." For a second, Drew sounded to recapture a shred of countenance. His casket heaved, his voice pulsing as he murmured, "You'll no way understand," and also, in a low, nearly inaudible tone, he added, "I didn't mean for any of this to be." The courtroom inclusively said at that concession. It was a quiet moment, nearly inappreciable amidst the chaos, but for Trina and Kai, it was a vital turning point. Then was the verity, a man admitting responsibility, indeed if only incompletely, indeed if wrapped in defenses. Trina's hand went to her casket, her breathing shallow. Kai's aspect remained fixed on Drew, his mind calculating the coming way, the counter-accusations, the fallout. And the fallout would indeed be immense. Port Charles, a megacity formerly replete with secrets, backstabbings, and conspiracy, would no way see Drew Kane the same way again. Musketeers, abettors, and indeed casual familiarity began to rethink their connections, questioning whether fidelity had been lost, whether trust had been eyeless. Carly, Alexis, and other crucial numbers felt the temblors of Drew's unraveling acutely. Rumors and enterprise spread like campfire, and within hours, the media delirium boosted. Captions screamed about Drew's insane courtroom meltdown, while judges batted whether this was a evanescent lapse, a cerebral collapse, or the tilting point in a much larger narrative of deception. Trina and Kai, still, weren't concentrated on the external chaos. They were concentrated on what they had come to understand through scrupulous observation and disquisition: Drew's own conduct, his choices, and the consequences he could no longer escape. Trina's mind replayed every commerce, every indication, every subtle shift in Drew's jest. Each moment had been a piece of the mystification, each slip of the lingo a thread leading to the verity. Kai, ever the strategist, mentally entered the ramifications, the legal consequences, the implicit peril Drew still posed, the openings for intervention, and the possibility of redemption, if Drew could find a way to defy the reality of his conduct. As the trial continued, the pressure remained palpable. Drew, still reeling from his own outburst, alternated between protective wrathfulness and fearful soul-searching. The execution pressed on with regular perfection, presenting substantiation, questioning substantiations, and sluggishly but surely unraveling the complex web of dishonesty. Each disclosure inspired another surge of emotional response from Drew, who came decreasingly erratic, more vulnerable, more mortal. And for Trina and Kai, each response was both evidence and heartache, a testament to the complexity of the man they had formerly known and the graveness of the verity they had eventually uncovered. By the time the judge called a recess, Drew's address had shifted from explosive wrathfulness to a concave abdication. The fire in his eyes bedimmed, replaced by prostration and the faintest trace of remorse. Trina exhaled, the pressure in her shoulders easing slightly, while Kai maintained a watchful watch, knowing that this was far from over. Outdoors, the megacity buzzed with enterprise, but within the courthouse walls, the emotional Verity had been laid bare, and for the first time, the path forward was illuminated, not with clarity, but with understanding. As they stepped out into the corridor, journalists and bystanders surged forward, hopeless for a soundbite, an explanation, a response. Trina's voice was calm, steady despite the storm around her. "We got our answer," she said simply, eyes meeting Kai's. He jounced, a silent acknowledgement of the Verity they now carried with them. Drew Kane had lost it in court, but in losing control, he'd revealed the reality of his conduct, the complexity of his choices, and the inarguable consequences that awaited him. Port Charles would no way forget this trial, nor would it forget the man at the center of it. Drew Kane's emotional meltdown wasn't just a courtroom event, it was a seismic shift in the narrative of the megacity, altering connections, reports, and futures. And as Trina and Kai walked down, the weight of Verity settled on their shoulders, heavy but liberating, a memorial that in a world of secrets and falsehoods, the pursuit of Verity, no matter how painful, remains consummate.